In 2007, Nokia chose to defend Symbian instead of rebuilding for touch computing. That decision placed hardware efficiency above software control. It preserved carrier leverage over user experience. It protected internal power centers over future adaptability. The result was not immediate collapse. It was structural exposure. When Apple Incorporated introduced the iPhone under Steve Jobs, the battlefield shifted from device manufacturing to software ecosystems. Nokia saw the shift. Internal warnings circulated. Touch-first interfaces were analyzed. Platform vulnerability was documented. Command acknowledged the threat, then fortified the legacy architecture anyway. This episode prosecutes that decision, not as hindsight, as traceable miscalculation. Being first did not guarantee survival. Being dominant did not guarantee alignment. The charge is precise. Nokia defended its operating system structure at the exact moment the industry reorganized around software control. The collapse that followed was not surprise. It was escalation. Before 2007, Nokia controlled the global handset terrain. It dominated distribution. It optimized supply chains. It engineered durable hardware. It understood carrier politics better than competitors. Market share exceeded 40% globally. Profit margins were stable. Brand trust was institutional. In many regions, mobile phones were synonymous with Nokia. This dominance created the blind spot. Success validated the architecture. Symbian powered hundreds of millions of devices. Internal teams believed scale equaled durability. Incremental improvement felt rational. Touchscreens were viewed as a niche experiment, not structural reset. Inside the company, software was fragmented across divisions. Decision authority was dispersed. Political survival favored preserving platform continuity. Hardware teams held influence. Carrier relationships shaped incentives. User experience centralization was weak. Control was mistaken for foresight. The battlefield appeared stable, but stability was misread. Command interpreted volume leadership as strategic immunity. It was structural overconfidence. When the iPhone was unveiled in 2007, it reframed the device. It was not a phone with software. It was software that happened to make calls. Internal Nokia analysis recognized the shift toward full-screen interaction and centralized platform control. Reports circulated describing user interface disruption and ecosystem lock-in risk. Yet the internal debate was distorted. Symbian engineers argued for gradual adaptation. Executives prioritized release schedules. Carrier partners resisted losing interface influence. Division leaders defended territory. Rebuilding the operating system meant redistributing power. That was the real threat. The fortress illusion activated. Leadership treated touch computing as an add-on, not a structural rewrite. Instead of consolidating software control, they layered complexity onto legacy code. Compatibility was preserved. Speed was sacrificed. Clarity was diluted. Incentives rewarded short-term device launches. Long-term architecture redesign threatened internal hierarchies. Command chose political stability over structural reset. The decision was not ignorance. It was protection. After 2007, deterioration was subtle. Early touchscreen devices from Nokia were inconsistent. Interface lag increased. Developer interest fragmented. Software updates slowed under architectural strain. Meanwhile, Apple consolidated control. Hardware, software, and distribution aligned vertically. Developers were centralized. User experience became standardized. Ecosystem loyalty deepened. The asymmetry widened quietly. Nokia still shipped millions of devices. Revenue masked fragility. Market share decline was gradual, not catastrophic. This was the silent escalation. Internally, reform attempts clashed with bureaucracy. Platform replacement discussions triggered fear. Leaders hesitated to declare Symbian obsolete. Admitting structural weakness would destabilize confidence. So, incremental fixes continued. Each patch preserved the illusion of recovery. Each release increased technical debt. Exposure was compounding beneath performance metrics. The collapse had not arrived, but inevitability had begun. The counterforce did not attack volume. It attacked control. After 2007, Apple Incorporated consolidated the App Store model. Software distribution centralized. Developers were given a single standard. Hardware iteration aligned with operating system control. This was ecosystem fortification. Meanwhile, Google advanced Android as a scalable alternative. It absorbed manufacturers who feared exclusion from the new software hierarchy. platform gravity began to shift away from Symbian. Nokia remained focused on device cadence. Competitors focused on platform capture. The terrain reorganized around ecosystems, not hardware shipments. This was the strategic asymmetry. Nokia optimized product cycles. Its rivals optimized control loops. User data, developer loyalty, interface consistency, these became leverage weapons. Nokia's internal structure could not match the vertical integration forming externally. The battlefield narrowed. And Nokia was positioned on the wrong axis. Inside Nokia, platform replacement meant internal disruption. Symbian teams had status. Executives had public commitments. Carrier partners had influence over interface control. Rebuilding from zero would centralize authority. That threatened divisions. Political self-protection activated. Short-term shipment targets were prioritized over long-term architecture integrity. Earnings reports reinforced incremental strategy. Leadership hesitated to declare the platform obsolete because markets punish uncertainty. This is incentive-driven blindness. Public stability was valued above internal truth. Meanwhile, developer dissatisfaction increased. Fragmentation slowed innovation. Competing platforms simplified development while Symbian complexity compounded. Engineers warned of structural strain, but warnings implied leadership miscalculation. Command isolation followed. Data was interpreted defensively, not diagnostically. The illusion of competitiveness was preserved through volume metrics. Structural weakness remained unaddressed. The longer replacement was delayed, the higher the switching cost. Exposure was compounding. By 2009, ecosystem dominance was accelerating. Apple's integration deepened. Android scaled across manufacturers. Nokia responded with layered adjustments. Touch improvements were incremental. Software modernization was partial. Strategic clarity was absent. Instead of decisive reconstruction, leadership attempted dual-track experimentation. Multiple operating systems. Internal competition. Conflicting roadmaps. This was the escalation trap. Each new initiative increased internal friction. Resources were spread across legacy maintenance and speculative reform. Authority blurred. Decisions speed slowed. Externally, competitors gained simplicity. Internally, Nokia multiplied complexity. The market began perceiving inconsistency. Brand clarity weakened. When organizations attempt to defend legacy assets while experimenting with reinvention, they often achieve neither. The fortress was not abandoned. It was overextended. Each defensive move increased exposure. The market eventually recognized asymmetry. User loyalty shifted toward ecosystems. Developer gravity concentrated. Application quality diverged. Nokia's hardware remained competent. Its software perception deteriorated. Perception is strategic leverage. Once the narrative shifted from innovation leader to lagging platform, recovery required structural reset, not iteration. Investor pressure increased. Internal morale fractured. Leadership credibility weakened. The silent escalation became visible. At this stage, defensive messaging intensified. Public reassurance. Roadmap announcements. Reorganization efforts. But exposure had already migrated outward. Competitors were no longer reacting to Nokia. They were competing with each other. That is the structural break. Irrelevance begins when rivals stop measuring you as primary threat. Collapse was not immediate, but power had shifted. By 2010, internal strain was visible. Symbian was slowing. Developer confidence was eroding. Android adoption was accelerating across manufacturers. Within Nokia, authority fragmentation deepened. Software and hardware divisions operated with misaligned priorities. Reform advocates argued for decisive replacement. Legacy defenders warned of destabilization. The debate was no longer technical. It was existential. When Stephen Alop assumed leadership in 2010, he inherited not a product crisis, but an architectural crisis. The famous Spurning Platform memo acknowledged the exposure publicly. That acknowledgement confirmed what internal reports had signaled years earlier. But public diagnosis does not equal structural recovery. Cultural inertia resisted abrupt reversal. Rewriting the platform meant dismantling internal power centers that had shaped the company for over a decade. Leadership now faced a constrained choice set. Time had been consumed. Optionality had narrowed. The blind spot had evolved into decision compression. In 2011, Nokia abandoned Symbian as its primary future platform and partnered with Microsoft to adopt Windows Phone. This was not innovation. It was capitulation. Instead of rebuilding internal software control, Nokia outsourced platform destiny. The logic was defensive. Compete neither with Apple's vertical integration nor Android's manufacturer coalition. Align with a third ecosystem and regain differentiation. But this move introduced new dependency. Platform control shifted externally. Execution timing was misaligned. Developer ecosystems had already consolidated around iOS and Android. The Windows Phone strategy required ecosystem resurrection, not participation. Nokia now fought on borrowed terrain. This was strategic migration under duress. The company that once defined the battlefield was now negotiating for relevance within someone else's architecture. The fortress illusion had collapsed. But the reset was partial. Power cannot be reclaimed through partnership if leverage is already diminished. Adopting Windows Phone did not reverse perception. Market share continued declining. Developer gravity remained concentrated elsewhere. Consumers compared ecosystem breadth, not hardware polish. Meanwhile, Android manufacturers improved rapidly. Price competition intensified. Feature parity closed. Innovation cycles shortened. Nokia's differentiation narrowed to design and build quality. Software ecosystems define switching costs. Hardware does not. The strategic miscalculation of 2007 compounded into dependency by 2011. Investor confidence weakened. Internal morale eroded. Public messaging emphasized optimism. But the battlefield no longer revolved around Nokia. Competitors were fighting each other. The command illusion dissolved. When influence evaporates, collapse becomes administrative rather than dramatic. The company that once shaped standards was now reacting to them. In 2013, Nokia sold its handset division to Microsoft. This was the institutional acknowledgement of lost command. The company survived, but not in its dominant form. The smartphone war had reorganized power permanently. Apple controlled vertical integration. Android controlled scale distribution. Nokia exited the primary battlefield. The innovation misalignment collapse completed its arc. The original decision, defend Symbian rather than reconstruct, had migrated across years, leadership changes, and strategic pivots. The collapse was not caused by one memo. It was caused by cumulative avoidance of structural rewrite. The silent escalation ended not in explosion, but in transfer of assets. Power redistributed. The market stabilized without Nokia at the center. That is the final evidence in this phase of the trial. The decision's consequences outlived the decision-makers. When Nokia exited handset dominance, the battlefield did not pause. Power redistributed. Apple incorporated consolidated premium vertical integration. Hardware, software, and services locked into a closed loop. Margin discipline became strategic weaponry. Google expanded Android across global manufacturers. Scale became defensive armor. Distribution became influence. Manufacturers that once depended on Nokia's ecosystem aligned elsewhere. Developers concentrated around two platforms. Access to users narrowed to gatekeepers. The smartphone industry shifted from fragmented competition to platform duopoly. Nokia survived in telecommunications infrastructure, but it no longer defined consumer computing direction. This is the long-tail structural damage of innovation misalignment collapse. Once platform gravity consolidates, late entrants cannot reconstruct optionality. Power, once redistributed, resists reversal. The Nokia case is not isolated. Innovation misalignment collapse appears when legacy leaders optimize for continuity while competitors optimize for redefinition. The blind spot forms under sustained success. The command illusion follows. Leadership believes scale equals foresight. Then the silent escalation compounds. This pattern has appeared in photography, retail, and media transitions. Dominant firms misread platform shifts as product extensions. They defend distribution relationships instead of rebuilding architecture. The sequence is predictable. Success. Signal discounting. Incremental defense. Escalation. Dependency. Transfer of power. The mechanism is psychological before it is technical. Incentives reward stability. Reconstruction threatens authority. Delay appears rational. Until optionality disappears. Nokia did not fail because it lacked engineers. It failed because it defended structure during structural reset. That pattern migrates across industries. It is forming wherever incumbents mistake iteration for reinvention. Today, platform transitions continue. Artificial intelligence integration. Hardware-software convergence. Ecosystem lock-in intensification. The strategic question is constant. Will incumbents defend current architecture or dismantle it before competitors force them? The Nokia episode demonstrates a critical threshold. Recognition must precede compression. If acknowledgement arrives only after market migration accelerates, maneuver space narrows. Strategic migration means patterns relocate, not disappear. Leadership teams now face similar inflection points in multiple sectors. Where incentives reward quarterly stability over structural risk-taking, exposure accumulates quietly. The early warning signs resemble 2007. Fragmented software, defensive messaging, incremental upgrades masking foundational weakness. The blind spot does not announce itself. It is diagnosed through alignment gaps. The Nokia decision of 2007 is not judged by hindsight. It is judged by structure. The charge was clear. Defend legacy architecture during platform reset. The evidence showed internal warning, incentive distortion, political self-protection, incremental fortification, delayed reconstruction, compressed optionality, power transfer. The collapse was gradual, predictable, traceable, but the verdict does not close with Nokia. The real question persists. Which current leaders are defending fortresses while the terrain shifts beneath them? Innovation misalignment collapse does not announce itself publicly. It compounds silently until the battlefield reorganizes. And by then, adaptation becomes surrender. The pattern stands unresolved.